Welcome to Auburn, Our Story, a series presented by the White River Valley Museum exploring unique perspectives on our area's extraordinary history. A good education has long been a priority for the people of this valley. In times of the earliest settlers, the schoolhouse was often the first community building to be built in an area. Fran Calkins moved to Auburn in 1944 after starting her teaching career in a one-room schoolhouse in South Dakota. She joined the Auburn School District as a kindergarten teacher, and over her 32-year career with Auburn, she taught in all of the first 3 elementary schools in the district. Here, she shares with us her unique perspective on her fun-filled career.
Auburn was just a little town, and very friendly. Main Street was pretty much like it is now. I came to Auburn because my husband was from Auburn. And after he came back from a tour of duty in Africa and Italy, we settled in Auburn. I had 4 years of experience when I came to Auburn. I had taught 2 years in South Dakota in a very rural district and had the first 3 grades, 9 pupils in the first 3 grades. Then I taught in Wyoming, Rawlins, Wyoming, and that was when I first ran into children of different cultures. There were lots of Hispanics who worked on the railroad, and so we had their children. Then I came to Auburn, and there were not very many teachers, so somebody said, well, Fran, you should put in an application, which I did. And then I immediately went home to South Dakota to see my mother. When I came back, there was a contract waiting for me. They didn't even interview me. So, and I was the 100th teacher that was hired in the district at that time. The first room I taught in Owanka, South Dakota, was not much bigger than this. It was, the town was very small, and there were, all the grades were in one building. The first, second, and third grades were in one room, and the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th were 8th were in another room. And then the high school was upstairs. So it was quite an experience. I was very close to the Black Hills of South Dakota, and we got to go visit Mount Rushmore real often, and so it was a nice experience in that respect. My first teaching experience in Auburn was at Washington Elementary. I had a room much bigger than my first room, and I had 30 pupils, and we sat in the old-fashioned desks that were all on boards so they could move them around. And the old kindergarten rooms, we always had to have rest period, you know. And in Washington School, the year that I had 38 kindergartners, there was not even room to walk around among them. I remember I was awfully glad as a kindergarten teacher when they allowed us to wear pants. So it made it much easier. I could get down on the floor then. Don't think I could now. Kindergarten wasn't always mandated by the legislature. And so I would move wherever there was an overload and helped out and only taught half day. I started out in Washington School with Joda Ray as principal, then North Auburn, just for 1 year, first grade, and Esther Ott was the principal. North Auburn was the first new school, Dick Scobie School, and incidentally, I taught his brother Jimmy in first grade and knew Dick quite well. He would come in to check on his brother. He was such a nice young man. So North Auburn was built in 1954, and then I was asked to go out there with an overload from Washington School. So I went to one of the rooms that wasn't occupied, and I taught until March of that year. And then in March, I was able to adopt my first son. So I intended to finish out the year, but didn't make it. I got strep throat, so I then stayed home. And I stayed home then except for substituting until my youngest son was 6 years old and went to school. So there was an interim in there where I just substituted. Then in 1961, there were 4 kindergarten classes at the Presbyterian Church because they didn't have any room for them. So then the next, I went to Chinook, and I taught with Esther Hodson and taught a half a day. Chinook was built in 1963, and I had an overload class up there also. And in that class was Shelley Shimajima, who belongs to SOS. He's helpful at the museum. And I had Gordy Nishimoto, president of our board. And that was the best class I ever had. Went back to Washington School for kindergarten. And then, 1966, I went to the old Algona School, and Diantha Curbs and I taught kindergarten. She had the morning, I had the afternoon. And Bill Ray was our principal. So after that, because I didn't have a certificate, and teachers were in fact, it was kind of difficult for some teachers to get jobs. So they said, Fran, you just can't teach anymore. And then Paul McCurdy, who had one time been a principal in Auburn and was a headmaster at a private school in Kent, asked me to come and teach kindergarten over there. And I did for 5 years. It was an interesting experience. And then somebody said, why don't you come back and work at the administration building? And that helped with went into my teacher's pension, so that helped with my pension. And I taught for 10 years I worked for 10 years at the administration building. So I was 68 when I retired and taught quite a while. There are now 14 elementary schools, 4 high schools, and 4 middle schools. So that's quite a lot of growth. I remember at the time I started, the one who was in charge of first grade teachers didn't want us to teach phonics. It was just, just word reading. And but I'm afraid I didn't mind her. I taught phonics anyway. And but the math and everything is much more advanced in kindergarten now. And that was in first grade that they know so much more now, and of course there's so much more for them to know. I think I told you I was the 100th teacher that was hired, and now there are 14,599 students, which more people than there were in Auburn at that time, and there are 840 teachers now. So my principal at that time was Gildo Ray, and he since has had a school named after him. He was the principal at Washington, and then he went to Pioneer the year that it was built. A jovial man, very, very supportive of his teachers, and we had lots in common because my husband was a fisherman and he was an avid fisherman. So I have an interesting story to tell you about. I was substituting a long-term substitute job in Pioneer when Gilda was there. And I had mostly kindergarten children that needed extra help. So one day this little girl came, and the mother had left the home, so her daddy was taking care of her. And she had chopped her foot. She was cutting wood to build a fire, and it had gotten so infected, and the bandage wasn't very clean, and I knew it was hurting her, so couldn't do it nowadays. But I said to Jodo, I am going to take her home with me, and I'm going to soak that foot, and I'll have her back in time to go home on the bus. So I did. I took her home, gave her a bubble bath and lunch, and one of my friends went to gather clothes for her and another one bought her a new pair of shoes. And when we took her back, the children said, oh, she was so pretty because her hair I'd curled her hair and she looked so darling. But you couldn't do anything like that now. I enjoyed my class very much. Have some interesting experiences. With younger children like that, you never know what they're going to say. And I wish I had written a book of all the things that happened, and some of them were really hilarious. Art Linkletter, when he wrote his book about children saying things, was very smart. They just say so many cute things. This little boy, the principal brought me my check, and he said, you get paid for this? He probably thought he did all the work, and I got paid for that. The children just say anything, you know. This one day, a little boy came in the room. He was late, and he came in and he slammed the door, and he said, teacher, you know why I'm late? And I said, no, I don't know. Because my dumb little sister wouldn't get off the pot. Then another incident, I had a little boy who had not very much hair. And he was the youngest of 4 boys, and he was an obstreperous child. And his mother would send him to school every day with his hair combed with sugar and water, just spick and span. One day I was asking him something, and he didn't, when they were coming in from recess, I asked him, didn't pay a bit of attention to me, so I took hold of, I just said, are you listening to me? And that sugar and water in that hair, it broke off. And I know I looked so startled, and he said, oh, that's all right, teacher, I needed a haircut anyway. Oh, they're just so spontaneous. And at the age that I taught, they very seldom had a discipline problem. You know, they love you as much as you love them. You know, I used to hold them on my lap and hug them and give them a kiss on the cheek, which you aren't supposed to do now either. So, and that would be very difficult for me now not to be able to do that. But it certainly is a change in children from when I started. If you had to chastise a child for something that they shouldn't be doing, that took care of the whole room for the rest of the day. But before I left teaching, it wasn't that way either, you know, so the children are different, more independent. One time there was a little boy who was very naughty, and he wouldn't do anything that I asked him to do. So I said, I think it'd be a good idea if you sat down here in the closet while... Fortunately, it was a big closet where they all hung their coats, and fortunately, I had worn a coat that day, because after the school bus had left, I went to my closet, and there he was. I do think that, and I noticed it towards the end of my teaching, they didn't listen as well. They could tune you out, because when they're home, they're watching television, and they tune out everything else. And so it was more difficult to get them to pay attention. So, and it's interesting, just last Mother's Day, I was out to dinner with my son, and we had to wait. There was a line of people waiting, and I saw this young lady looking at me, and I didn't really recognize her. And finally she came over to the table, and she said, does the name Bonnie Peterson mean anything to you? And I said, well, yes, I had her in first grade. And she said, well, that's me. I'll run into people in the grocery store, and I recognize some of them, but they change more than we do. So anyway, I used to have a turquoise ring, and when I wanted them to listen, I'd tap it on the blackboard, and I'd say, this is my magic ring, and it means you have to listen. So one day I ran into a girl, and she said, do you still have that magic ring? She remembered that was our signal to be quiet. Few times I didn't go to school the first day of school. I felt kind of like a fire horse, I had to be there, I had to go. But because I dearly love working with children. So for several years after I taught Sunday school, which sort of filled. And then I had my own boys to teach, so now grandchildren. So it's... my oldest son said, you never quit teaching, Mom, and I guess I don't. So it was a wonderful experience. I made so many close friends and wonderful memories, and no, I would not want to do anything else.
For more historical views of Auburn, come see us at the White River Valley Museum at 918 H Street in the Lescove Community Campus, or you can visit us online at www.wrvmuseum.org. The museum is open Wednesday through Sunday from 12 to 4 p.m. Call us at 253-288-7433 for more information. Thanks for watching. Please join us again for another unique perspective on Auburn, Our Story. With every passing moment, history is made. What will yours be?